George Osborne's opposite number. Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls joins us from central London. Lovely to have you on the programme, Mr. Balls. So can you start by giving us your reaction, your thoughts, now that we've actually had time to reflect on the budget that Mr. Osborne delivered yesterday?
Well, I think the most significant thing is what it said about the economy and borrowing, which is not the thing which has hit the headlines. As you said, that's about pensioners and tax. Fundamentally, the UK is barely growing this year, just 0.8%. The independent OBR, the forecasters, have downgraded growth next year. They've downgraded business investment every year. George Osborne is borrowing £150 billion more this Parliament than he was planning a year ago. Austerity has to carry on into the next Parliament. There is no short-term plan for growth and jobs. There is no long-term plan for growth and jobs. I have to say, in the Eurozone, where they've been facing sovereign debt problems because of the euro, they're having austerity. Here in Britain, we are imposing a euro crisis style economy on Britain when we don't need it. It's actually not working. It's counterproductive. That is the biggest deal, the thing which I think is most important for the markets and for businesses.
I mean, we've just been hearing from Fitch and Moody's, and of course there are a lot of people saying that they don't put a great deal of significance on what these companies say. Nevertheless, they made some valid points. They've said that this particular budget is neutral, but nevertheless, they're saying that Britain could lose its top-tier credit rating if it slowed down its programme of cuts. When you look at what is happening in the Eurozone right now, that is a risk that the UK could potentially face if the government was to do what you're saying, isn't it?
Well, look, Standard & Poor's said of the Eurozone a few weeks ago that austerity by itself doesn't work and can become self-defeating. The credit rating agencies in August downgraded the US economy in August, and since then, unemployment falling, growth stronger. Here in Britain, we've had a Chancellor of the Exchequer who a year and a half ago said, "We've taken off negative outlook, a vote of confidence in my plans." A year and a half later, just a few weeks ago, he's put back onto negative outlook and he says, "It's a vote of confidence in my plans." Both can't be true. I have to say, I do not think the credit rating agencies are a particularly credible leading indicator for either sovereigns or individual companies. These were the rating agencies who gave AAA to subprime, AAA to Lehman Brothers. But I do think setting your policy by the credit rating agencies, saying they are the test of your policy, I think that's a pretty foolish way to make economic policy.
No,
I think in time George Osborne will regret this.
Well, Mr. Balls, you can't deny that there is perhaps some progress being made. We had a slight upward revision for growth to 0.8%. The government is trying to help ease the pressure on households right now from slow wage growth and perhaps high fuel costs by that sharp rise in personal allowances to get them to spending more. And then we had a corporation tax cut to 24%. So there are measures being put in place to try and spur growth and investment, are there not?
I know, but good grief, Maryam. In November, which was the autumn statement which really mattered, a massive downgrading for growth this year and a huge upgrading in borrowing for, the forecast period into the next Parliament. And all yesterday said was nothing has changed from that much more negative, bleak outlook from last autumn. George Osborne a year and a half ago said he had a thing called expansionary fiscal contraction. He said cutting faster on the deficit and going earlier on tax rises would boost growth and job creation. The opposite has happened. That's the fact. That's why Britain's borrowing is in a difficulty. That's why he's already breaking the fiscal rules he announced at the beginning of the Parliament. That's the reality. The corporation tax cut, look, the OBR says, will have no impact upon growth and business investment is downgraded.
Well, Mr. Balls, tell me, what would you do differently if your party was to come into power in the next election? How would you spur businesses and companies to essentially spend and invest their cash instead of sitting on it?
I think point one, you have to have a credible deficit reduction plan. There's no doubt about that for Britain. But credible means it's got to work. And that means it needs to be balanced and steady. And going too quickly is counterproductive. I think right now, we do need some stimulus from fiscal policy in our economy because monetary policy can't do the job. And I think George Osborne was too quick with his tax rises. And we would say, get the economy moving. Listen to the IMF's advice, which was, if the economy undershoots, slow the pace of fiscal contraction. Thirdly, there's got to be some vision about where we're going with the British economy, and we've got to solve the problem of why banks aren't lending to small businesses. Finally, you've got to make sure that you take the population with you, so your tax changes must be fair. And I'm afraid being in a position where the Chancellor's announced he's hitting pensioners, he's hitting families, but he's going to give a huge tax cut for people above £150,000. I mean, most people don't think that's very fair, I'm afraid.
I mean, freezing the pensioners' tax allowances, Mr. Balls, it's going to extract, what, more than £1 billion a year for the government. As you say, it is very unfortunate for those people that are going to be impacted by this. But isn't this what it means to be cutting back on debt and spending?
Well, the problem is George Osborne's not cutting back on debt and spending. He's borrowing £150 billion more because people are not confident, businesses aren't investing, consumption has been low, our economy's not growing. And you've got to get a balanced approach to these things. I've been involved in many budgets over the years. Normally people hold back some good news for pensioners. I've never known a Chancellor hold back such bad news for pensioners before. Why is he singling out pensioners with the tax rise yesterday, when at the same time, as I said, the tax rise, the tax cut at the top is so huge, it doesn't really make sense.
But Mr. Balls, many are arguing that there's no point, including the government, unsurprisingly, there's no point in keeping this tax in place if it's not generating the revenue that it's supposed to, and if it's encouraged tax avoidance, it's deterred foreign investors and driven wealth away from the city at a time when the country needs it most.
Well, look, George Osborne's taking a huge gamble. The Institute for Fiscal Studies said it was too early to reach the judgment you've just made. He's got no evidence for these assertions. Fact, he has spent £3 billion giving an average £10,000 tax cut to 300,000 legitimate taxpayers who earn more than £150,000. He's crossing his fingers and saying, let's hope that people in tax havens not paying tax, maybe watching your programme, are suddenly going to say, well, my gosh, let me pay some more tax in Britain now, and that will bring in £2.9 billion.
No, but
he's
also cracking down on them in other ways, right? Because there are measures there to increase stamp duty on homes worth more than £2 million, and then, of course, those that are trying to avoid stamp duty or trying to purchase those homes through offshore companies. But does that mean that if you were to get back into power, you'd put the top rate back up to 50%? Well,
look, on your first point first, about 1% of top-rate taxpayers move every year with a plus £2 million house. So 99% of them don't pay the stamp duty. The stamp duty and tax avoidance together is £500 million. He's spending 6 times more than that, giving the tax cut at the top. And then he's got this heroic assumption, as I said, he'll get loads of tax revenues coming in. But I think that flies in the face of reality. We'll have to wait and see. We are clear, Labour, we would not do this now. It's not the right priority. I've also been clear, no tax rate is set in stone. I personally, as a Shadow Chancellor, as a Chancellor, would rather every tax rate could be lower if we could afford it, but it's got to be the priority. I can't make commitments now about 3 years' time. I'm not going to say what I can do in a manifesto in 2050. I don't know where we're going to be. But right now, do you really think that this tax cut at the top is the priority when the economy's not growing, youth unemployment's rising, pensioners and families are worse off? I'm afraid you can't win that argument. George Osborne will not win that argument. He's made a big mistake. The slogan today is a budget for millionaires paid for by millions. That's not a good position to be in as a Chancellor of the Exchequer. It's not what you want.
All right, the view of UK Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls joining us from central London. Thank you.